Well, hello again, and thanks for watching. Over the last few years, I've received a lot of messages from people asking about the live version of Coming Up on the Paul McCartney Tour of 1989-1990, asking me how I came up with the idea for the intro and stuff like that. And so I'm going to attempt to go over it today. So we were down at Paul's studio every week, and we'd been making promo videos for the singles off Flowers in the Dirt and jamming some of the songs we might play on tour. And then the rehearsals started to get a bit more serious. And Paul came in one morning and said he decided that everyone in the band should have a showcase moment in the show, which was quite amazing and generous in one way, but also, on the other hand, quite terrifying. Going back to my youth, I'd always loved dance music, disco and funk, and then fusion. I went to college in 1975 and started playing a lot of fusion, but I loved artists like George Duke and Herbie Hancock that brought out dance tracks and did 12-inch singles. As a young drummer, if you did a summer school or something, you were always tasked with learning Pick Up the Pieces by Average White Band or Chameleon by Herbie Hancock. So that was the kind of stuff I was doing all through my youth, playing funk and disco and music like that. I started collecting 12-inch singles when I was at college in the late 70s and continued on through the 80s. And I've still got a few on vinyl. This one's totally amazing. This is one of my favorite ones, Ronnie Law, All For You. Ronnie Law's All For You. And of course, Prince, Sign of the Times. What an amazing record that was. Totally unique. And in my view, one of the best drum recordings ever made by Trevor Horn and Steve Lipson, Grace Jones' Slave to the Rhythm. In the 80s, I was in various bands, the Waterboys, Julian Cope, and also playing on pop sessions. And the record label would often get another producer in to do an extended version of the main single for a 12-inch single. And it wasn't really a DJ culture back then. It was, they would bring in like dance music producers, or the original producer of the album would do the extended version. We had Trouble Funk, Washington Go-Go Band come in and do a remix of World Shut Your Mouth for Julian Cope, things like that. And I was in a band called The Catch with Don Snow. We had a hit record in Germany, and he brought in Paul Hardcastle to do a remix of one of our songs just before he released 19, which was a massive hit. And he was just triggering samples and running a TR-808, Roland TR-808 drum machine, and he kind of made a whole new song out of it. As a fan of that kind of music myself, I'd ask them where they got their samples from, and sometimes they'd share their samples. We had DAT machines in the studio then, and I used to take a DAT and they'd run off a few samples for me, so I had a collection of samples on DAT. For example, I really liked the Cameo record Word Up, and it had an amazing sort of snare, mix of a snare and a clap on it. And then the Fine Young Cannibals brought out She Drives Me Crazy, which had a very similar sound. So everybody wanted to collect these sort of remix sounds and use them on their own projects. So I had the Prince album Love Sexy, which was released in the middle of 1988. And I noticed that there was a track on there that started with like a sequencer bass and quite a complicated drum part, a track called Dance On. And so I thought maybe I could do like a drum groove intro for Coming Up, and throw in some samples and loops and things like that. And I thought if I could do something like that, it would get me out of the idea of having to play a drum solo, which would have been a disaster. So when it came to putting together Coming Up, the intro, I'd sampled a percussion loop that we'd actually had on the album. And so the whole thing was based on that, the tempo and the feel of that loop, which happened to work perfectly for Coming Up. And then I looked through all my DATs of samples that I'd collected over the past few years, and I put a few samples together, put them on a Roland Octopad, and I also had a trigger on like a small China type cymbal that I was triggering. So it was a bit more of a show. I was hitting things all over the place. So today I don't have any of those samples anymore. They've all got lost in the mist of time. And I managed to sample the percussion loop off the live album, but I've just played the drum part for you. I can't do all the triggering. I just don't have those sounds anymore. So it would have been even more complex. Well, of course, I didn't want to just slavishly copy the feel of Dance On. Plus, the loop I'd sampled off Flowers in the Dirt had a different feel anyway. So here's the Prince feel. Now the loop off Flowers in the Dirt was a lot more syncopated offbeat, and here's that. I knew that the loudest thing in the PA in these kind of concerts would be the bass drum, maybe Paul's vocal. And so I really wanted the groove to kick hard when the band came in. So I decided that I would do the whole intro without bass drum, basing it around the toms and the snare and the samples that I was triggering. And then the bass drum would only come in with the whole band with Paul on bass. And that's how it worked out. It really kicked in majorly when the whole band came in. I know Paul really liked Prince too. When Prince came to Wembley in 1988 on the Love Sexy tour, we all went. Me, Robbie, Wicks and Hamish, we went with Paul and Linda to the show. And when I came up with this idea for the intro to Coming Up, I can't remember Paul making any comment or saying he liked it or he didn't like it. He just seemed to go with it, which was great for me. I've never played the Prince track. It just inspired the idea really. So I've had to learn it to make this video to show you how it goes. And also I haven't played the intro to Coming Up since the final McCartney show that I did in 1990, July 1990. So I had to practice that a bit again as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the video.